My name is Alan Curry. I was born in Gull Lake, Saskatchewan. It was 1960, and not many people from Saskatchewan traveled the world, but I went to McGill and met quite a few people, and they encouraged me to visit them. So that led to my big trip that I didn't originally plan on taking. We took off from Montreal. We landed at Goose Bay for refueling, and then the next one was Shannon Airport in Ireland. Now my trip went on to Dublin, but I got off and went north because I wanted to see rural Ireland, and traveled up and stayed in a youth hostel in the northern part of the country. Okay, from my diary dated the 22nd of June, 1960, I had an interesting talk with an old farmer who wore rubber boots and lived in a cottage with a thatched roof. It started to rain and 3 pullets came into the house. Okay, so after the youth hostel, I took a train across to Dublin, and then another train to Belfast, and then across the Irish Sea to Scotland, Ayrshire. I bought some records and songbooks, got measured for a kilt, saw some Scottish country dancing, then went across to Edinburgh and saw Edinburgh and Wales, where I visited a farmer who had retired to Wales from Saskatchewan. And he and his wife showed me around northern Wales. And then I took the train to London. In London, I slept in Euston Station overnight because I couldn't find any place that had any room. And then I went from there to Paris, and then to Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Frankfurt, Vienna. In Vienna, I stopped for 3 weeks because I wanted to spend a little bit of time in one place, and there was a course I enrolled in Viennese culture, sort of. So I spent the 3 weeks in a kind of a big house with a bunch of people, one of whom I still see occasionally because he was British, but he moved to Toronto. He's my oldest friend in Toronto because I met him in 1960. Okay, from Vienna, it wasn't on my ticket to go to Venice, but Alitalia kindly let me stop at no extra charge on the way to Rome. So I did see Venice. I met an American who was being met by a guy in a gondola, so he invited me to accompany him, so I got the gondola ride from to the place I was staying, which was a hostel. Anyway, then I went to Rome, where the Olympics were on, and I overheard some people talking, and they had an extra ticket which they sold me. So I did see one field hockey game in Olympic Stadium in Rome. Okay, after Rome I went to Athens, stayed in Greece for a bit, took a side trip to the island of Tinos, saw the Parthenon, and took a trip to a place called Daphne where I saw the picture of Jesus on the ceiling of an old monastery. I went to Cairo, and a pretty interesting place to see, museum, pyramids, and so on. And then to Jerusalem, which at the time was split between the West Bank and what is now Israel.
The United Nations Committee spent months in Palestine traveling over the disputed areas and conferring with Arabs and Jews. The majority of the committee members recommended that Palestine be partitioned into an Arab state and a Jewish state, and under international control, the city of Jerusalem.
I stayed in Ramallah for about a week, so hospitable it was hard to get away. Then I stayed in Tel Aviv. I remember talking German to the proprietor of the home, English to her kids, but they talked Hebrew to each other, so three languages going. And then Yom Kippur was arriving and the country closes down. I was told I better leave. So the only plane out that had room for me was to Tehran, which wasn't on my itinerary, but I didn't have a visa for it, but the Swiss at the last minute gave me a visa, and here I then show up in Tehran not knowing much about the place. And I was walking down the street and a guy said to me, "Hey, you look like you could speak English," and I kind of suspiciously shrank back. He said, "I'm from Denmark." "Oh, well, you're from Denmark, you're okay." And his name was Soren Astrup, and I hung out with him for a while. He'd been there for 3 weeks or so already, knew his way around. He already had a girlfriend who was 8.5 months pregnant. So that's what turned out to be the excitement in Tehran. Then I went to Karachi, the hottest place, I think. Didn't stay, went north to Lahore. Stayed there for a while. Had an interesting situation there. I was going into the YMCA, and on the way, though, some young fellows attached themselves to me out of curiosity, and a young man come up, and as they do in India and Pakistan, and curious, asked about me, and he said, "Oh, I know a Canadian named John Todd. He works for so-and-so." "Oh," I said, "I don't know the guy." But anyway, when we get home the next day, my host said, "We're going to visit your friend John Todd." No, I don't know him." "No, we're going to see him." So we drive to this place, and I'm embarrassed because I don't know the guy. We knock on the door. John Todd asked, "Oh, he came." Well, what could the poor guy do? You know, he invited us in, and we stayed and had a meal there. My host who brought me there, he ordered steak, and I said, "Do you guys by any chance have any peanut butter? I haven't had any for a long time." So I had made myself peanut butter sandwiches while he ate his steak. And then when John Todd got in, afterwards he invited me to stay in the room with him for a while. So Lahore turned out to be a pretty interesting place. And I went to India from there.
The new Republic of Pakistan consisted of 2 zones in the northwest and northeast corners of the subcontinent, separated by 1,000 miles of Dominion of India territory.
Arriving in India, I decided to take a side trip to Kashmir. And in Kashmir, the thing to do is to stay in a houseboat. So with an American I met on the plane, we arrived at the houseboat, and the owner had a guest book for us to sign. And in looking at the previous guests list, there was a guy I knew from Montreal. And I knew, I'd been told he was traveling around the world the other way, the other direction from me. And I had no idea I'd ever run into him, but there he was, stayed in the same houseboat. He'd then left for New Delhi.
New Delhi symbolizes the new India, striving forward with this ideal for so many different people, of so many different religions and philosophies.
So I got to New Delhi, but what the heck, you know. Anyway, I went to visit the Birla Temple in New Delhi, and I was the last guy on the tour, I guess. So I was talking to the tour guide at the end, and he said, "Oh, yesterday," he said, "there was a very friendly guy from Canada here, like you, very friendly guy." I described my friend. Yeah, it sounded like him. My God. Well, I said, "Where do you go from here?" "Well," he said, "he was staying in the station overnight, and then he was going to Pakistan." Well, that sounds like him all right. He's going the right direction. Which station, Old Delhi or New Delhi? He didn't know. So I took the tricycle taxi to New Delhi station, first, second, third class hotels in the station. He wasn't at either one of them. I go to the Old Delhi station, first, couldn't find a second, third class hotel. He wasn't in either one. I was about to leave and I thought, well, I better check the second, but I couldn't find it. Finally, somebody explained it was out on the platform and there's a big burly guard there. And I said, that guy's guarding the door. Oh, he'll let you through, you're a foreigner. So I go through, I said, I'm looking for a Canadian. And he said, there's a foreigner down at the end of the platform. Go down and check him out. So I go down the end of the platform and there's a Turk there. Oh, I said, I was looking for a Canadian. He said, in the washroom. I looked in there's an anteroom, and then I looked in the door of the washroom. There's my friend washing his face. He looked up and said, Alan Curry, what are you doing here? So he changed his plans about going to Pakistan and stayed with me in Delhi for a couple of days. And when he did go to Lahore, I told him about this place I stayed, John Todd. He went and got a job with the company for a while. So it worked out very well for him too. But talk about coincidence, eh? Okay, from Madras I went to Calcutta, where I had a friend from McGill and had an interesting time there. Then to Burma, where I had another friend from McGill. And then to Cambodia. Now I wanted to see Angkor Wat, which is famous, so I flew to Siem Reap, the little town next to Angkor. And on the way there in a DC-3, the pilot tilted the plane so we could look down on the monuments from the air before we landed. I figured, well, gee, this is what they do when they fly in here. But it turned out that a woman said, my sister went up to talk to the pilot and convinced him to do this. The wings were just above the treetops. The pilot, I remember saying, there was no danger, he said. So anyway, that was my entrance to Angkor. Stayed in the hotel there for several days and saw the sights. Then went to Vietnam overnight only. From Vietnam I went to Japan. First of all to Kyoto, and then to Tokyo. In Tokyo, I met a young fellow at the YMCA interested in learning English. He was a Hank Williams fan. If you said, hey, good looking, he'd say, what you got cooking? He knew all Hank Williams songs. And he and his friends took me out to a club that played that kind of music, which I rather enjoyed. Okay, I ran out of money in Tokyo due to poor planning. I figured out I better write home for money, and that I had 42 cents a day to live on, which would buy 3 14-cent meals till the money came. So that's the situation I was in.
Well, we really did have a wonderful time. Anybody who doesn't in Hawaii, I'd say there's no hope for him.
Then to Hawaii. And on the way to Hawaii, there was a young guy on the plane traveling around because his father worked for British Airways. He traveled free around the world. And he had an uncle in Hawaii. And so the uncle met him at the airport, and I went along with him. And the uncle belonged to one of these surf clubs, I guess. So my entrance to Hawaii was a surfing club, and was swim in the water of Waikiki. So anyway, then Hawaii, then to Vancouver, and back to Canada and home. traveling alone was no problem because I always ran into people, usually my own age, often university people, and there's hardly a place I went that I didn't seem to run into somebody that was in a similar situation. Brochen lum, tanna lum, brochen lum a suan, brochen lum, tanna lum, brochen lum a suan, brochen tanna, 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 brochen lum a suan.